When a person no longer thinks for themselves but merely echoes what is acceptable, popular, or safe, they are not living, they are surviving. They have been conditioned to believe that survival is enough, that safety is virtue, that being accepted is the same as being known, and so, slowly, without realizing it, they trade the wild unpredictability of their soul for the predictable approval of the world. It does not happen all at once. It begins with a subtle compromise, dressing a little differently to fit in, speaking a little more carefully to avoid judgment, laughing at jokes you do not find funny because silence would make you an outsider. At first, these are small adaptations. They feel harmless, even wise. We call it being professional, being realistic, growing up, but the danger lies in repetition. Each time you silence your inner voice to preserve your place in the outer world, you carve away a piece of your authenticity. And eventually, you forget what your real voice ever sounded like. The person who imitates does not always appear weak. In fact, they often appear highly competent, articulate, polished, admired. Their calendar is full, their resume gleams, their opinions match the trending sentiment. But if you sit with them long enough, if they ever allow the mask to slip, you will see the hollowness behind their eyes. They have become masters of performance, but strangers to presence. They say what people want to hear, but they no longer know what they themselves believe. This is not intelligence, it is survival intelligence. It is the genius of the child who learned early that authenticity could be dangerous. The child who was too loud and was punished, too sensitive and was mocked, too curious and was silenced. So they learned to read the room, mirror expectations, become what was safe. And now, years later, they are praised for being adaptable, high-functioning, likable. But these are only shadows of a deeper tragedy. They have lost their inner compass. And when a person's inner compass is broken, they no longer move toward truth, they move toward approval. And they don't ask, is this right for me? They ask, will this be liked? Will this succeed? Will this offend? Their lives become governed by invisible algorithms, social, cultural, institutional. Their choices become predictable, their desires increasingly faint. They do not rebel because rebellion requires a spark. And the spark has gone out. There's a particular agony that comes from this state. It is not dramatic. It is not loud. It often doesn't look like suffering at all. It looks like doing well. It looks like promotion, popularity, influence. But inside, the person is gasping. They can't feel their own life anymore. The moments that once thrilled them now feel muted. Achievements feel distant. Even love begins to taste like obligation. The soul is not designed to live on borrowed truths. Consider the corporate executive, successful by every metric, respected by colleagues, adored by family. He moves through the world with ease, charismatic, organized, composed, and yet, in a rare moment of stillness, he confesses, I don't know who I am when I'm not performing. These are not the words of someone failing. These are the words of someone disappearing. When imitation becomes a way of life, the imagination begins to die. You stop asking questions that have no easy answers. You stop sitting with contradictions. You stop dreaming of things that defy logic or approval. You become efficient, but not original. Productive, but not passionate. You live within the lines drawn by someone else's hand. And worse, you begin to believe the lie that you chose them. Many people fear failure. But there is something far more terrifying. Succeeding at a life that isn't yours. Climbing a ladder that leads to someone else's house. Becoming the person your culture wanted, only to realize that the cost was your own soul. The path back from this imitation is not easy. It requires a confrontation, a breaking of the spell. Most people will resist this because the truth, once seen, is not easy to unsee. To wake up from a life of performance is to grieve. To grieve the years spent chasing validation. To grieve the self you silenced to fit in. To grieve the dreams that were set aside in the name of responsibility. And yet, this grief is sacred. It is a sign that something true remains, that beneath the role, the uniform, the smile, there is still a voice whispering, I want more. Not more money, not more status, more reality, more soul, more meaning. That whisper is the soul trying to reawaken. You may find it in unexpected places, in the ache that rises during a quiet walk, in the tears that come without reason during an old song, in the sudden envy of someone living simply but freely. These are not weaknesses, they are signals, echoes of the self you abandoned, but who never abandoned you. Do not ignore them. Imitation is easier, but it is not freedom. It is a prison made of applause, and the longer you stay in it, the more you forget how to live without an audience. You say, you must be happy, but you signal love. The unknown, a prison, the unsettled, a fear. You were not made to perform. You were made to become. Becoming is messy. It is uncertain. It does not guarantee approval, but it is real. And reality, however raw, is the only place the soul can breathe. You will have to say no to things you once said yes to. You will disappoint people who preferred the mask. You may lose the approval of those who admired your role but never saw your truth. That is the price of coming home to yourself. But what you gain is beyond measure. You begin to feel again, not just joy but sorrow, rage, tenderness. You remember your own voice. You rediscover curiosity. You stop needing the world to confirm your worth. You carry your own fire, and in that fire, the false self burns, and something ancient, something alive, steps forward. It is not who the world told you to be, it is who you've always been. Quietly waiting beneath a performance, avoiding outer conflict is easy. You nod, you smile, you agree. You say what they want to hear, what will keep things smooth, what will not disturb the fragile fabric of peace. On the surface, this looks like maturity. It looks like kindness. But underneath, something else begins to happen. Something far more dangerous than the conflict you're avoiding. You start disappearing. This disappearing doesn't happen all at once. It's gradual. You bite your tongue in the name of harmony. You swallow your opinions to avoid argument. You downplay your needs because you don't want to seem difficult. And slowly, you stop recognizing yourself. The person in the mirror has your face, your voice, your gestures, but something essential is missing. Something alive. Something untamed. People often believe that conflict is the enemy of love, but real love, of self or others, cannot exist without conflict, because conflict is born of difference, and difference is the evidence of individuality. When we erase our inner tensions in the name of outer peace, we are not being loving. We are being afraid. The deeper danger lies not in the arguments you avoid with others, but in the ones you avoid with yourself. You feel anger, but tell yourself it's inappropriate. You feel loneliness, but tell yourself you're being ungrateful. If you feel the pain of sin, but tell yourself you're outgoing, the difference between being perfect and being imperfect is whether you avenge or avoid. When you feel a deep craving for something more, but dismiss it as childish fantasy, you begin to treat your soul like a problem to be managed rather than a truth to be heard. And the cost? Numbness. That strange, quiet fog that settles over your days. You still go to work, you still smile in photos, you still laugh at jokes, but inside there's a stillness that isn't peace, it's silence. The silence of a voice that's been ignored for too long. True peace is not the absence of noise, it is the presence of alignment. And alignment only comes when we face the inner contradictions that live within us all. You want to belong, but you need solitude. You crave intimacy, but you fear being seen. You long for change, but you cling to the familiar. You want freedom, but you're terrified of letting go. These are not signs of weakness. They are signs of depth. You are not confused. You are layered. But when we avoid these tensions, when we choose one side and exile the other, we do not grow, we fracture. One part of you becomes dominant, the role you present to the world. while the other parts retreat underground. These buried parts don't vanish, they wait. And while they wait, they stir. They haunt your dreams. They erupt in strange anxieties. They leak out in sarcasm, procrastination, sudden tears, a woman once shared. I was always the peacemaker in the family, the one who kept things calm, smoothed things over. Everyone relied on me to be stable. She paused. But I realize now I was just afraid to speak. And when she finally began to tell the truth, not even to others, just to herself, her hands began to shake. That trembling was not weakness. It was life returning. It was her soul reminding her that peace without truth is just another form of imprisonment. It seems that her soul reminding her that peace without truth is just another form of imprisonment. It seems that her soul reminding her that peace without truth is just another form of imprisonment. And she said that her soul reminded her that peace without truth is just another form of we are taught from an early age that conflict means danger. Many of us grew up in homes where raising your voice meant triggering an argument, where crying meant being told to toughen up, where asking for space meant rejection. So we learned to avoid conflict, not just with others, but within ourselves. We built identities out of what was tolerated. We called it being easygoing, chill, drama-free, but beneath those labels is a deep terror, the fear of being rejected for our full reality. The fear of conflict is, at its core, a fear of rejection. If I say what I really feel, will you still love me? If I admit what I really want, will you still stay? If I become more than what you expect, will you still recognize me? And so we stay silent. We compromise, we contort. But the soul has limits. You cannot make a home out of self-abandon. You cannot build peace on a foundation of suppression. At some point, the tension becomes too great. The soul begins to revolt. This revolt does not always look like rebellion. Sometimes it looks like exhaustion, or depression, or unexplained resentment, or physical illness. The body begins to speak what the mouth cannot, because the inner conflict has gone unacknowledged for too long. Healing begins not with answers, but with honesty. Can you admit that you feel one thing and its opposite? Can you hold the tension between longing and fear, between love and anger, between hope and grief? Can you sit in the storm of your inner world without rushing to fix it? Because maturity is not found in resolution, it is found in integration. You can want to stay and still dream of leaving. You can love someone deeply and still need space from them. And that means if you're still waiting for someone to come back around, if you're still waiting for someone to see you, if you're still waiting for someone to be with you, if you're still waiting for someone to fix you, if you're still waiting for someone to come back around, can you admit that you feel the same way? You can hear the same things from them, about them. You can be grateful and still be dissatisfied. This is not hypocrisy, it is humanity. The soul is not linear, it is paradoxical. And the refusal to accept this paradox is what creates suffering. To live fully is to feel the friction of opposites inside you and to give them both a seat at the table. To speak even when your voice shakes. To admit what you've avoided. To ask yourself, not what is safe, but what is true. This kind of inner honesty is not gentle at first. It burns, it breaks illusions, it calls forward the parts of you that have been shamed or silenced. But it is also the doorway to real peace. Not a peace that comes from avoiding the storm, but a peace that comes from standing in it and saying, I can hold this. And in that moment, when you choose truth over comfort, when you choose presence over performance, you begin to feel something you haven't felt in a long time. Yourself, not the version of you that's been curated for others, not the role you play in your family, your workplace, your culture, but the raw, trembling, honest you, the one who feels deeply, the one who dreams recklessly, the one who dares to speak even when it's inconvenient. That self is not the enemy of peace. That self is peace because it no longer has to be at war with itself. A soul in danger does not always scream. It often goes quiet. It does not always collapse in crisis. Sometimes it drifts softly, silently into indifference. This is the most dangerous sign of all. Not despair, not sadness, not even rage, but the loss of awe, the inability to be moved. When a person can walk through a forest and feel nothing, hear a symphony and remain untouched, watch their child laugh and feel no stirring inside, that is not a sign of strength. That is a warning, not a flaw of character, but a rupture of connection. Something vital has gone missing. We are not meant to be spectators of life. We are meant to be moved by it, stirred by beauty, shaken by grief, softened by wonder. When awe disappears, it is not just the heart that closes. It is the bridge between the soul and the world that collapses. And once that bridge falls, a person may still function, but they are no longer living. They are merely enduring. This emptiness can wear many masks. It can look like success, responsibility, stability. The person may go to work, care for their family, laugh at the right times, but inside they are numb, not because they lack emotions, but because they have grown so used to ignoring them that they no longer know where to look. And eventually, even the hunger for something more fades. What remains is a dull, gray flatness, a life without texture. We often mistake this for burnout or depression, and sometimes it is, but often it runs deeper than any diagnosis. It is a spiritual drought, a famine of the soul. And like any famine, it does not begin with total absence. It begins with scarcity. First, the sunsets become routine. Then the music becomes background noise. Then the laughter of your loved ones becomes something you only notice after it's gone. What's most haunting about this condition is that it is not painful in the usual sense. It is not marked by tears or panic or visible breakdowns. It is marked by the absence of those things. It is quiet, and that quiet can last for years. The soul does not die easily, but it can be silenced. There was a time when you could be undone by the sight of stars, when the right piece of music could unravel you, when a child's question could stop you in your tracks, when poetry could feel like prophecy. But now, it's different. You scroll, you nod, you go through the motions, and deep down, you wonder, when did I stop feeling alive? That question matters, because awe is not a luxury. It is not something extra for the emotional or the artistic. It is essential. It is the soul's way of knowing it belongs to something larger, something timeless, something sacred. Without awe, we forget who we are. Modern life does not make it easy to stay connected to awe. The schedules, the screens, the endless noise. They condition us to flatten our experience, to move fast, to stay numb, to get through the day. But life was never meant to be something we just get through. It was meant to be something we feel, something we are pierced by, awakened by, broken open by. There is research that supports this ancient truth. A study from the University of California, Berkeley found that experiencing awe, even briefly, has measurable effects on well-being. It lowers inflammation, expands our sense of time, it increases compassion. In short, awe doesn't just change your mood, it changes your biology. It returns you to your humanity. But when awe is absent, the opposite happens. We become smaller, more rigid, more easily offended, more easily bored. We seek artificial stimulation because natural wonder no longer reaches us. We scroll endlessly, not because we're entertained, but because we are searching for something that might touch us. And what's even more painful is that we don't always remember what we've lost. We normalize the numbness. We tell ourselves we're just busy, just tired. But beneath the fatigue is grief. A grief for a life we're no longer in relationship with. One man described it this way: I realized I hadn't cried in years, not because I was strong, but because nothing moved me anymore. I looked at my newborn daughter and knew I was supposed to feel something, and I felt nothing. That scared me more than any panic attack ever could. That moment was not a breakdown. It was a revelation. It is in those moments of stark realization, when indifference becomes visible, that the possibility of return begins. Because if you can still recognize that you feel nothing, that means something in you still remembers what it feels like to be alive. The question is not, why am I numb? The deeper question is, what part of me have I abandoned to survive? Because all requires openness, and openness requires vulnerability. Many of us shut down not because we are cold, but because we have been wounded. We stop being moved because being moved once brought too much pain. We harden not out of cruelty, but out of protection. But protection becomes a prison when we never take off the armor. To feel awe again means allowing life to touch you, even if it breaks you open. It means standing under the night sky and letting it humble you, sitting with a piece of music and letting it unravel something hidden, looking into the eyes of someone you love and letting it matter. It may start small, a moment of stillness, a flicker of emotion, a crack in the numbness. That crack is holy, because life is not asking you to feel everything all at once. It is only asking you to feel something, to follow that thread, to move toward what awakens, even faintly, your sense of the sacred. The soul does not need fireworks to come back to life. Sometimes it only needs silence, attention, a question honestly asked, a moment honestly lived. If you feel nothing, do not despair. The absence of feeling is not the absence of life. It is the soul waiting, waiting for you to notice, waiting for you to remember, waiting for the moment you stop searching for more stimulation and start searching for meaning. There is still time. There is still wonder. There is still a way back. Begin there. Beware the person who can explain everything but feels nothing. Beware the one who is fluent in theory but silent in presence, articulate in diagnosis but empty in experience. There is a kind of intelligence that impresses the world and simultaneously starves the soul. It masquerades as mastery, but it is a form of exile, a slow, calculated banishment of anything that cannot be measured, predicted, or controlled. Rationality is not the enemy, it is a gift, a beautiful, necessary gift. It builds bridges, deciphers code, organizes chaos, solves problems. But when it becomes the only language a person speaks, it begins to destroy what it cannot understand. Rationality becomes a god, and anything that doesn't bow to it, feelings, intuition, mystery, is dismissed as weakness or nonsense. And in that dismissal, something sacred is lost. These people are often praised. They are called stoic, level-headed, disciplined. They make excellent leaders, doctors, engineers, CEOs. But what few see is the cost beneath the competence. These are the people who can describe their trauma in perfect detail, but have never wept for it. These are the people who can say they have no stomach ache. They are safe with their money. They have no secrets. They are fully supported and socialized in mystery. These are the people who can describe their trauma in perfect detail, but have never wept for it. Who can map their childhood pain like a blueprint, but have never trembled in its memory. Who can break down the anatomy of heartbreak, yet have never allowed their chest to crack open and feel it. A man once spoke about his past with striking clarity. He listed the moments of neglect, the emotional wounds, the betrayals. He used psychological terms. He referenced studies. He even made jokes. But when asked when he last cried about it, he looked confused. Cried, he said. That wouldn't help. And in that moment it was clear. He had built a fortress out of understanding, and in doing so had locked himself out of his own heart. Insight is not healing. Knowing why something hurts is not the same as feeling the hurt. You can explain the storm without ever stepping into the rain, and many do. They study their inner world like a scientist behind glass, observing, labeling, classifying, but they do not enter it. They do not let it touch them, because to be touched would mean to be vulnerable. And for someone who worships control, vulnerability is terrifying. But the soul does not respond to control. It responds to surrender, to the trembling, to the unraveling, to the parts of life that cannot be understood, only felt. The person who tries to live by logic alone ends up severing the very roots that make them human. They become efficient but not alive, brilliant but brittle, structured but soulless. This is not a judgment. It is a tragedy, because behind the need to explain everything is often a wound. A moment early in life when chaos came and logic became a lifeline, when feelings were unsafe and detachment became a shield, when being rational wasn't just a preference, it was survival. These people learn, perhaps without knowing it, that emotions get you hurt, that dreams get dismissed, that sensitivity invites shame, so they sharpened their minds and silenced everything else. They became masters of thought and orphans of feeling. But no matter how well you understand the past, if you haven't felt it, it still owns you. The uncried tears still live in your body. The unspoken rage still pulses beneath your calm. The abandoned dreams still whisper in your sleep. You can suppress them for years, decades even, but they don't disappear. They wait. And while they wait, they make themselves known in quieter ways, in restlessness, in emptiness, in an inexplicable sense that something is missing. The person might say, I have a good life. I've done everything right. So why do I feel so numb? That is the voice of a soul suffocating under the weight of unexpressed truth. There is a reason people are drawn to mystery, to art, to music, to prayer. These are the languages of the soul. They do not demand explanation. They ask only for presence. And in that presence, the mind is no longer in charge. The logic yields. The feeling speaks. And something deep within us stirs. Not because it makes sense, but because it makes us feel real again. The rational person often fears this, because emotion cannot be predicted, intuition cannot be proved, mystery cannot be dissected. To embrace these is to surrender control, to enter a space where the mind does not lead but follows, where knowing gives way to listening, where explanation becomes less important than experience. But this is not regression, it is return. A return to the fullness of being, a return to the part of you that can't be charted on a graph or explained in a paragraph. Weeps at beauty, that aches in the silence, that trusts without evidence. To live without mystery is to live without depth. You may see clearly, but only on the surface. You miss the richness, the contradictions, the raw, wild, unpredictable nature of being human. And that is what makes life worth living. Not the certainty, but the wonder. If you find yourself constantly explaining, analyzing, managing every corner of your inner world, pause, ask yourself, what am I afraid to feel? What part of me have I placed under lock and key? Not because it was wrong, but because it made me feel too much. And if in that quiet something stirs, let it. Let yourself not understand. Let yourself not solve. Let the tears come even if you don't know why. Let the dream return even if it scares you. Let the mystery speak, even if it says nothing at all. You do not need to make sense to be whole. You only need to feel what is true. And in that feeling, you will find something far more powerful than certainty. You will find yourself. The part of ourselves we most fear is not our failure. It is our capacity for darkness. Rage, envy, lust, hunger for power, deep insecurity, manipulative desire. We carry these within us whether we admit it or not. But instead of confronting these forces directly, we push them underground. We pretend they do not exist. We label them bad, wrong, not me. And in doing so, we create the most dangerous illusion of all, that we are only what is visible, only what is clean, only what is good. This hidden part of us, what we exile, repress, and deny, is what many have come to call the shadow. It does not disappear because we disown it. In fact, the more we repress it, the more power it gains. It becomes sharper in the dark. It lives behind our smiles, seeps through our kindness, erupts through our passive aggression. We think we are in control, but we are not. The shadow, unacknowledged, is the one driving our choices, not from the front seat, but from the trunk, hidden but steering all the same. The most dangerous people are rarely the ones who feel rage. Rage, when seen and felt and honored, can be understood. It can be directed. It can be healed. But the person who insists they never feel it, who insists they are always calm, always kind, always right, is a person at war with themselves. And that war has casualties. They say things like, "I'm never angry," and yet their energy crushes a room. They snap at baristas, humiliate waiters, seethe at traffic. They justify it as just having high standards or being direct. But the truth is, their rage has no safe place to be seen, so it leaks out in every place it can't be acknowledged. They say, "I'm only trying to help," but their help comes with strings. It's not a gift. It's a way to maintain control. They advise, they fix, they rescue, but underneath it all is a desperate need to feel superior, to be needed, to be right. They say, "I'm a good person," but their goodness is fragile. It depends on others being wrong, flawed, broken. They shame those who disagree. They punish difference. They need the world to mirror back their self-image, and when it doesn't, they lash out. These are not evil people. They are wounded people. People who never learned that their darkness could be integrated. People who were taught that to be acceptable, they had to be clean. That to be loved, they had to be pure. And so they amputated parts of themselves and tried to walk through life whole. But no one can be whole without their shadow. To deny your shadow is to lie to yourself. And that lie, told often enough, begins to feel like truth. And they potentially told often enough begins to feel like truth. You forget the rage you swallowed. You forget the grief you buried. You forget the cruelty you're capable of. But forgetting does not mean freedom. It means captivity. What you forget begins to rule you. A therapist once said, "The most dangerous patient I ever had wasn't violent. He was kind, polite, respectful. But he had no access to his grief, no memory of his anger, no ability to feel anything beneath the surface. And one day he disappeared." That story is not rare. Many people walk through the world like ghosts of themselves, functional, smiling, disconnected. Their shadow has swallowed them from within. You do not have to be violent to be dangerous. You only have to be unaware. People who believe they are only good become blind to their own harm. They do not see the way they manipulate others, the way they dominate conversations, the way they make others feel small just to maintain their sense of righteousness. They justify everything. They blame others. And because they believe they are just being helpful or just being honest, they never pause to reflect on their impact. True safety, true wholeness does not come from being pure. It comes from being real. And being real means being honest about what lives inside you, even if it terrifies you. You are not just your generosity. You are also your jealousy. You are not just your wisdom. You are also your pride. You are not just your empathy. You are also your desire for power. And that's not a flaw. It's a fact. The question is not, do I have a shadow? The question is, am I willing to meet it? Meeting the shadow is not about indulging it. It's not about justifying harm. It's about becoming conscious. When you know what you're capable of, you have a choice. When you don't, you become a puppet, controlled by impulses you don't understand. To integrate the shadow is to sit with your darkness without shame, to admit your ugliest thoughts without collapsing into them, to say, I have rage, I have envy, I have desire, and I will not let them drive my life in secret. It takes courage to do this, because the shadow holds all the parts of you that were once rejected, the rage that was punished, the grief that was dismissed, the longing that was shamed. But in those rejected parts are not only your wounds, they are also your power. Your passion lives in your rage. Your compassion lives in your grief. Your purpose often begins where your longing once hid. When you deny these parts, you don't just lose your darkness, you lose your fire. You become palatable but lifeless, acceptable but inauthentic. You forget what it means to be fully human. The work then is not to be spotless, it is to be integrated, to know yourself fully, to walk through the world not as a saint, but as a person who can say, I know the monster in me, and because I know it, it doesn't control me. That is where safety begins, not in pretending to be pure, but in having the maturity to carry your complexity with honesty and care. Because the world doesn't need more perfect people, it needs more whole ones. And to be whole, you must look into your own shadow, not to condemn it, but to understand it. Only then can you be trusted with power. Only then can you love without possession. Only then can you lead without control. Because only then are you free